Welcome on into Forward Progress presented by Fanduel Sportsbook. I'm your host, Eric Pauly, along with Judah Fortgang of Pro Football Focus and Professional Sports Better Suma. On this show on Mondays, we're going to try to take a forward-thinking look of what the Week 2 lines and openers are showing us. But of course, we're going to need to provide some context of what happened in Week 1 to actually, take a look at the market for Week 2, project some line movements, and also take a look at some future bets, which we will be doing on this show. But first things first, like I said, let's get into some takeaways from Week 1 that's going to impact the NFL moving forward. All right, gentlemen, I'll start with you here, Suma. We saw this past Sunday a lot of issues with quarterback play in the NFL and just some offenses looking sluggish and just some statistics showcasing that completion percentages over expected were lower. Just general pass rates in general were lower. So, Suma, when you see these stats and you also pair that with what you actually watched on your TV this past day, what are you most worried about in the NFL when it comes to offense, or are you not worried as it's just Week 1 and we need to hold the brakes on everything?
I'm not really worried. It's more like observations, because whether there is like a dip in efficiency league-wide, you just gotta understand why, and then you can also try to use that as your advantage. Because yes, 2022 there were lots more of passing efficiency was much higher, but we are still handicapping the same game, just in a different scale, so to speak of. And Week 1 was very interesting because pass rate over expected was very low. It felt low. It felt like teams were more running the ball, and then it was very interesting to also see that manifested in the pass rate above expectation. I felt like just from watching that O-line play was kind of shaky, and we were also dealing with some really, really piss poor quarterback play, like Bo Nix, Will Levis, Caleb Williams. This was very, very ugly. And I think overall we had a combination of OCs maybe a little bit running the ball more, O-line struggling, quarterback struggling, and that is the reason I have for a much lower scoring outcome compared to last year's.
Do you attribute that, Suma, to the lack of the cutting of the preseason game that we've seen, or is just general philosophy shift? Obviously, teams have had so long to prepare for their opponent in Week 1. What do you attribute it to?
Don't know, honestly. Don't really have the correct answer. I don't think that it's a lack of preseason, because there are always teams who really don't play their starters in the preseason. For example, Rams did not play a single starter in the preseason, I think. They were without both starting tackles, lost Steve Avila, lost Puka Nakua, and they maybe had the best half of football all of Week 1 in the second half at Detroit. So I'm not sure that's necessarily the preseason. Could be different stuff, like maybe O-line talent gets harder to find, harder to evaluate, don't know. OCs might be leaning towards the one a little bit more, which might also be correlated. So I think it's just a mix of different endpoints, and I'm struggling to really put a stamp on it and say that's the right answer to it.
Yeah, that's probably the great approach, to not pin it into one specific thing. I'm sure there are a lot of different reasons why that's the case. Judah, what are your thoughts? Because obviously the numbers don't lie. We saw numerically and also with our own two eyes. What are your takes on the QB and overall offensive struggles, or lack thereof aggression, I could say, for some of these offenses in Week 1?
Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of multiple things. The first of which is that football is a constantly changing game, and it's this kind of push and pull of offensive and defensive coordinators. And I think that over the last 5 or so years became very, very clear that passing was much more effective than running. And I think that was true to some extent until you start to kind of have a lot of these too high structures, and there's been so much talked about that. But at the end of the day, the things that were true last year, the things that were true 3 or 4 years ago are not necessarily going to be true, and teams are constantly adjusting. And I think there's a concerted effort to stop the pass. And in some ways, that's going to create some value rushing the ball, because this is not just a zero-sum game. And it does matter what teams think you are going to do and Passing when the other team thinks they're running is a lot easier, and vice versa. That I think there's some schematic element. But I also wouldn't overlook the fact that like the quarterback play over the last bunch of years has been pretty bad. Like CJ Stroud has really been like the only good quarterback drafted really since like the Herbert Burrow Tua class. Like there just has not been a great influx of young quarterbacks to kind of replace that great era of quarterbacking we had. Thinking of guys like Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, of course, Tom Brady, Manning, Aaron Rodgers, all these other guys. There just hasn't been that kind of new influx of talent, and we just have worse starting quarterbacks. I think it's kind of a function of these two things among many others. Of course, this is not a monocausal phenomenon. These are very difficult to kind of dissect.
Yeah, no, it's like you mentioned, very difficult to dissect, and Sue mentioned as well. There's so many things that can go into it, but you have to take a look under the hood and see that there are a couple of instances, like Sue mentioned, potential just O-line lack of talent. Like you just said, Judah, overall general QB play just not being up to the standards that we're used to, and teams preparing to stop the pass as the pass is proven. As your Twitter handle says, Judah, throw the damn ball. That has been the mantra, but of course, it's chess on grass, so it works both ways. But what you just said, Judah, brings up a nice segue. We saw a couple of rookies make their debut this week. We also saw some sophomore quarterbacks, get their starts in their year 2 season. Who were you impressed with? And who, of course, the Bryce Youngs of the world and the Caleb Williams, who got the win, but obviously didn't do much on the stat sheet. Any major takeaways from this week, or plain and simple with the rookies? It's week 1. Like, what really do you expect in their first career start?
Yeah, I think kind of my main takeaway here is that Jaden Daniels' like massive Achilles heel in college was his inability to avoid sacks. And he actually did a terrific job there. His pocket presence was great. I don't think he's a particularly great quarterback. I don't think he's in a particularly great situation. But I think that was a very, very encouraging sign. Look, you can't really look into 1 week of data, especially for a rookie quarterback. These guys are, in all likelihood, going to get better as the season goes along, as they get more comfortable in offenses. I am not making any sweeping conclusions. I think that's like kind of an interesting note. They kind of just like keep in mind as the season goes along. But yeah, I think rookie quarterbacks on the whole disappointing, but it is week 1. There's so much football left to be played.
Understood. So I'm assuming you're in the same boat where obviously it's week 1, you can't overthink. But what about some year 2 guys like Will Levis and Bryce Young, who obviously had a tough go around in New Orleans? Talk to me about your thoughts on them.
Oh, the Bryce Young experience was absolutely brutal. Like, you had no sense that anything would go along any smoother for the Carolina Panthers. And that being said, I mean, we talked about it last week on the Best Bet show. This is not like a top 5 defense, and they basically had like no shot at moving the ball. They didn't know what they were doing. As soon as Bryce Young was under pressure, there were some erratic throws overall, and that didn't really gave me like a good taste of the Carolina Panthers. That being said, week 1 overreaction is strong, but overall, I would have liked to see some more structural advantages going into that game. Will Levis, I mean, that was basically a peak Will Levis game as advertised last year. But the problem was that the circumstances were supposed to be much better going into this year. Nuke Hopkins, I don't think that he practiced with the first team at all last week, and he was also on a snap count. But other than that, I didn't feel like Brian Callahan was really getting a good groove into play calling in this game. And then you add all the major errors like that throwaway pass that he just wanted to throw out of bounds and turn into a pick 6. I mean, yeah, looked really, really bad. CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. I mean, CJ Stroud was really, really good. I think that the Houston Texans 1 game was on a completely different level this time. Lots of new concepts, and they were really efficient running the ball against a Colts front 7 that was supposed to be the strength of that defense. Really impressive. And then Stroud also, while not having that much of a consistency yesterday, but I think that he made some really sick plays and really continued to do all the good things that we saw last year. And Anthony Richardson also as advertised. I mean, 9 of 19, I think, hit like 2 crazy deep balls and overthrew AD Mitchell for like 2 easy walk-in touchdowns. I think Mitchell could have had like 160 yards, 2 touchdowns in that game. But that was also the Anthony Richardson experience. So, overall, I agree with Judah. It's somewhat concerning that we don't really see like a consensus, maybe incremental improvement among those guys other than CJ Stroud. And Anthony Richardson, the jury's still out. I think it was his 6th NFL start, so we will see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you said, Anthony Richardson 6th start. Will Levis, think that was his 11th or maybe 12th start. Obviously, the rookies in their first. Bryce Young had a full season last year, but that might be the only one we can maybe claim already that he might not be good at football. But Suma, I'm going to stick to you with quarterbacks. Jordan Love played a mediocre game, I guess we could say, on Friday night. Some good, some bad, and then he ends the game injured. Talk to me about the Packers QB situation moving forward.
I mean, Ryan Tannehill is not yet signed, so that's bad. So if they really go with Malik Willis, oh man, I mean, I really like Matt LaFleur. I'm incredibly high on him, but I would not want to sweat the Malik Willis experience. Like, I don't know what Matt LaFleur could do to get like a decent quarterback play out of him. Really, really tough. I really would have liked them to go after a guy like Ryan Tannehill, which would also, I think, fit that offense really well. And only 36 years old. But apparently, what is also my assumption is that the injury is not all that bad. Like some Twitter doctor guys said, like that injury for quarterbacks is usually like 0 to 2 weeks. If it's a little bit more brutal, could be 2 to 3 weeks. But right now, I'm assuming that Jordan Love might be back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, looking like 3 to 6 weeks, like our producer Jason just put up on the screen. Now, of course, Judah, 3 weeks of Malik Willis could be its own experience. But talk to me more about just Jordan Love, what you saw from his play on Friday night.
Yeah, I mean, like, he was not accurate. He was kind of missing a bunch of easy throws. And, like, this was all baked into the cards, right? Like, it was almost easy for a bettor or a fan to, like, cherry pick the kind of end of the season and say, like, oh, this is the upside of Jordan Love, and this is who he is, as opposed to saying, like, this is a part of who Jordan Love is, but also Jordan Love has the, like, first half of the season in him, which I think we saw on Friday night, a guy that's like missing some routine throws. I am no film expert, but it's like very clear to anyone watching of like he's spiking throws off his back foot instead of like stepping into actual throws, and that kind of like bears out in a lot of the data where he was particularly inaccurate in week 1, and now obviously is going to be dealing with some sort of knee issue for a bunch of the year, going to be affecting his pocket mobility. I'd also just note, like, he stopped scrambling. This was a guy who early last year was running a whole bunch and basically has like completely eliminated that part of his game. He didn't have a single rush yesterday, and this is not an unathletic guy. He's not a statue out there. It's pretty interesting, I think, how much he kind of struggled on Friday night, and now kind of how it's going to affect his play going forward.
Certainly something to monitor for the Green Bay Packers. We will be talking some NFC North in a little bit. Last takeaway that's actually a good segue into moving forward for the week. Judah, we saw some cluster injuries, particularly to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary. They already have a weak secondary. They had a couple players leave during that game. Then, like Suma mentioned earlier, the Rams O-line came into last night injured and also lost another piece on it. Were there any other cluster injuries that might have flown a little bit under the radar that you noted, or what are your thoughts on these Buccaneers and Rams injuries moving forward if you don't see another one that you like?
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with the Bucs here in particular, which is that, like, this is a team now that has like very little talent. I don't think it really mattered, considering I don't think the Washington passing offense is going to be lighting the world on fire. But I think it does lead to an interesting kind of style of play of like the Bucs didn't blitz as much as I anticipated that they would on Sunday, and this is a team that has really relied on the blitz. Last season was like 57%, I believe. And I think we're going to see a lot of that with Todd Bowles. Of like, we're going to have to try and bring the heat for try and get them to throw within a couple seconds because the secondary is not going to be able to hold up longer. So I think it's going to lead to some schematic changes on their end, and they'll have a bunch of these kind of boom or bust type games where they'll be very vulnerable deep. This was a team last year that was bottom 5 in explosive pass plays against. I think we're going to see a lot of that and some really high variance games for the Bucs on defense.
Definitely understood. Suma, thoughts on any cluster injury for any positional group for any team that you saw this past week?
Yeah, I agree with those two. Rams. Rams were surprisingly still pretty good after those injuries. Like McVay just demonstrated again, like how well the Rams can scheme guys open also quickly. And I think Stafford was absolutely surgical. So in general, when the Rams have poor O-line play, that usually correlates with their overall efficiency. So remains to be seen going forward. But I was very, very surprised, and it was a complete sweat in the end by how well the Rams played, being down 3-17. So maybe they are capable of designing their offense and their scheme a little bit more towards compensating those losses, which they have not been in the past. But in a vacuum, those are pretty much brutal injuries. If they are, again, without their starting LT, RT, and LG, not great.
Definitely not great, especially for the O-line that you need so much continuity. And these cluster injuries will build up throughout the season. These are just two teams dealing with them from 1 week of football. Unfortunately, in the nature of the sport, they're going to keep coming up. But let's talk some future looks. But before we get into the future looks for the show, we have to shout out our sponsor, Fanduel Sportsbook. Kick off this NFL season with a win on Fanduel, America's #1 sportsbook, one of the best, if not the best, user interface I've ever used. Amazing customizable pieces for same-game parlays, as well as some fantastic boosts. And right now, all customers get a profit boost every single NFL game day, which means you can pump up your gridiron winnings multiple times a week. For Monday Night Football, we have a no-sweat same-game parlay and a 50% profit boost on any live bet. And we're definitely going to be talking a same-game parlay for tonight's game, courtesy of Judah. So you can definitely use that on that no sweat on that parlay. FanDuel has tons of ways you get in on the NFL action. You can bet money lines, spreads, player props, and more. Plus, with super simple live betting, lightning fast bet settlement, and instant withdrawals, FanDuel makes betting on the NFL easier than ever before. Just visit FanDuel.com/forwardprogress to download FanDuel today and also support us. Disclaimer: must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in DC. Opt-in required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including token expiration. See terms for both offers at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts. And lastly, for New York, you can call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, gentlemen, let's discuss some future markets with some value for the rest of the season. Like I mentioned earlier, Jordan Love, of course, we discussed, has shown some issues. The Bears got the win, but they, of course, did not do so in the prettiest of fashions. You have the Detroit Lions, who won that game in overtime last night, and the Minnesota Vikings, who dismantled a probably very bad New York Giants team. Let's start with the NFC North. Judah, what are you thinking about the NFC North odds with such a tight race? 3 teams 1-0, of course, so early on. Who do you think can separate themselves as we move forward this season?
Yeah, I actually kind of see a little bit of value in 2 plays here. That is the Lions and Vikings, I think primarily on the Vikings side. And that's really just like selling the Bears and Packers. I think that a lot of the kind of market expectation going into the season for the Bears was that Caleb Williams was kind of already in this league average kind of set up, or his situation was so good that would enable him to be that. And I think you kind of have to go in with some hesitation. And like, I think he can put this together going forward. But the defense, they obviously forced a ton of turnovers. I'm not sure if like the defense is particularly good or like Will Levis is particularly bad. Also don't want to overreact too much. I just like, you kind of have to take a step back and say Caleb Williams right now is not league average. He could become that. But I think there's kind of some value there. And then like, if Malik Willis is playing 3 to 5 games, like he might be somehow worse than Deshaun Watson and Bryce Young. I mean, this is a guy who took sacks on like 32% of pressures. That's like 8% higher than the next quarterback. He's dreadful. There's no way around it. And like, no matter how good of a coach LaFleur is, it's really hard to kind of scheme away from someone like Willis. And the Packers are just egregiously mispriced in this instance. If Jordan Love is missing 4 or 5 games, I don't think they're going to be favored in many of those. All that is to kind of say for, Eric, you talk about like, oh, the Giants are pretty bad. I'm not so certain. I think this like Vikings defense could actually be really good. And they kind of have a bunch of these like analytics darlings, so to speak, like Jonathan Greenard and Andrew Van Ginkel, like absolutely popped in a lot of kind of underlying pressure metrics. I mean, Brian Flores is a terrific defensive coordinator. Like they have a ton of talent on that defense, kind of a little bit under the radar and surprisingly. And like offensively, look, I'm not going to go buy like, oh, Sam Darnold is the next great thing or any of that sort, but like they have the components of what make winning football teams in 2024. And that's like a really good offensive coordinator, very good weapons, and a quarterback that like if kept in the scheme and structure can produce fine. And I think that kind of fits the bill for the Vikings. And like, they're going to score points. I think that what really makes this team compelling is if this defense can kind of turn into a top 10, top 5 unit in a fairly weak NFC North. Going on for a bit here. And then just on the Lions side here, like you got to take the stable team. I mean, like they're good. There's no denying it. There's no real reason to overthink it. Of like, this team is so clearly better than anyone else. The NFL is random, and a team like the Vikings can kind of sneak in there, and there's some good value there. But I think the Lions are so far and away the best team in the NFC North right now.
Yeah, and like we mentioned when we discussed this the other week, like the Lions are a team that exactly what to expect from them. They're bringing back the same cast of characters. And you guys discussed on a different forward progress earlier this week. You know what you're getting with the Detroit Lions, and you're getting good based on the last couple of years. And now they've also improved defensively. Same system, same everything. O-line, which is great, or even got better. So definitely easy to see the Detroit Lions maintaining their continuity and making a run here. Suma, do you agree that the Vikings have the most overall value, or do you think that, again, the best way to go about this is with the proven team rather than, diving and trying to pick some straws at teams that have upside potential where we're more convinced that the Lions are actually a good football team?
Leaning more towards the latter. The only thing that concerns me with the Vikings, and I agree with Judah on basically everything that he said, my concern is that they are entering a really rough stretch in their schedule, and that's without TJ Hawkinson and potentially without John Addison for the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think that ankle might need some time to heal, and they are entering a stretch with the Niners, Texans, Packers, maybe without John Love, okay? New York Jets, Lions, Rams, Colts. I mean, those are some really tough opponents, and that's when the offense will be most handcuffed. So I think that the Giants might sneakily have the worst secondary in football right now. So I'm not trying to overreact to Sam Darnold really slinging it yesterday, even though I, in general, believe that he might be in the best overall scheme / supporting cast when we exclude the Niners, because he didn't really get a real start last season. But overall, for his career, I think he's in the best situation to succeed. But those upcoming games will be super tough.
We're going to learn a lot about the Minnesota Vikings, and if Sam Darnold, KOC, Brian Flores, and co. can maintain that level of play that we saw as they beat down the Giants on Sunday. Before we get into week 2 odds and, of course, finish off with Monday Night Football, let's talk about the Rookie of the Year. We'll talk offensive and defensive. Let's start with offensive. We had Jaden Daniels score 2 touchdowns on the ground, do well enough in the air, 184 passing yards. You had Caleb Williams, of course, not really do all too much. Marvin Harrison with the goose egg. We did see Xavier Worthy get into the end zone. Brian Thomas get into the end zone. We can go down the list. But Suma, started off, do you think that at this point now with Marvin Harrison going all the way down to 7.5 to 1, obviously he was so highly touted but didn't do much in his debut. Where are you seeing value on this offensive rookie of the year board?
Probably leaning slightly towards the wide receivers right now. At the current price, I think that Caleb Williams in this market right now is a little bit overrated, and there might be a lot of preseason hype involved, but like Judah said, we needed some hesitation. And the first game against a, let's call it, average Titans defense was like not great at all. Rome Odunze is getting a knee scan today. Keenan Allen has an undisclosed injury. I think that he landed awkwardly at the end of the game on some of these, I think, towards the right back of the end zone throws. And so there might be a chance that this supporting cast somehow looks completely different, maybe only for a short time frame, but this might be a season, even though he's the highest touted rookie quarterback in a very long time, this might be a season where he struggles. And if there are like guys like Jane Daniels collecting all the rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, maybe Marvin Harrison and Xavier Worthing having decent rookie season, I think that there might be a little bit more value, and that Caleb Williams right now at plus 140 is a little bit overpriced.
Yeah, definitely understand. I would agree. Obviously, not really doing too much, getting the win. We know voters like to think about those wins as well. Judah, talk to me though. Rookie of the year. What are you liking?
Yeah, Brian Thomas, 28-12. I actually really like this spot. I think if you're kind of fading a lot of the rookie quarterbacks, I mean, Caleb Williams, of course, should still be the presumptive favorite here. But if he's just not that good, I think there are plenty of cases to be made that actually Brian Thomas is probably in the best situation of any of the rookie wide receivers. I mean, Xavier Worthy flashed his ceiling right now. I think you're probably buying very high right now, but at its best, he is still the third option in this offense behind Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce, and the Chiefs are going to mix in a bunch of other guys. Malik Neighbors has Daniel Jones throwing him the ball, and Neighbors himself did not flash particularly. And then I think like Brian Thomas is a guy who, and I'm very high on this Jacksonville offense. Maybe they should stop fumbling the ball in the end zone. It's a tale as old as time, but he earned targets at the highest rate of any of the Jaguars. His early numbers look great, and by all indications, this is a guy that should excel in year one and is in a really terrific spot. It would not be surprising at all to see him leading this team in targets. And like he's got Trevor Lawrence throwing the ball. And if the rookie quarterbacks are not that good, I think there's a ton of value, and you're getting some really terrific odds here.
Absolutely love that look, Judah. It looks like we have our third member of our panel is finally here and ready to go. Cleve TA of cleveanalytics.com. TA, are you here?
Sorry, guys. Appreciate you having me in a little bit late.
No, appreciate you making the time to come in. We really appreciate it, and we love your insight. Yeah, you came in at a perfect time. Before we talk week 2 odds, we're going to go with 2 questions. Number 1, I know you were high on the Vikings heading into this season. Now you see what they did to the Giants in week 1. Jordan Love news, obviously, coming out of Green Bay. How much more confident are you in the Vikings' ability to make the playoffs now after what you've seen? Or are you ready to, not make any over-exaggerated claims? And just what are your thoughts on the NFC North picture moving forward now?
Yeah, I thought going in that Minnesota was a good sleeper team. Just you saw it yesterday with the coaching staff. I mean, how many coaching staffs have quality OCs, or I call it KOC and OC, but an offensive coach, and then paired with Flores? It's pretty rare, and you see what they do, even with moderate talent. So I think that they can squeeze out a couple extra wins just based on the coaching alone. And they're not going to be as dominant as they were yesterday. The Giants are one of maybe the worst team they'll face all year. They've got a tough stretch coming up, but I certainly think that at worst they'll be competitive. We'll see this week. 49ers coming off of a Monday night game, short week on the road. It's actually a good spot for them to potentially pull an upset. And if they could do that, I really do think that they can make a run at a wild card or potentially a division. Obviously they have Green Bay in a couple of weeks too, and that's about the time right around the cutoff, I think, where Jordan Love is likely out. So, they might catch a sneaky win that they weren't supposed to get. So, you can rack up a couple of wins here early before you get an easier stretch towards the end of the season. So, I mean, I still really I haven't even checked the division odds lately. It doesn't seem like it's moved too much since prior to the season, but I think of all the teams there, I do like them as the upside. I'm not as high. I was not as high on the Lions coming in as everybody else. I don't think I could have found a single person who didn't like the Lions this year, which was pretty interesting. Not that I thought that they were going to miss the playoffs or go under 500. I just thought that, we're banking on Jared Goff to just continue this stretch of excellent play. And it's still Jared Goff. Like, it's not like, this isn't Patrick Mahomes. This isn't Josh Allen, where we kind of know what their baseline, what their floor is. Goff has a floor that can bottom out at any time. I thought he was bad yesterday. If you look at his, clean pocket numbers, which is his calling card, he was pretty bad. If you look at even just PFF grades, I thought he underperformed. Now, maybe that's because he didn't have a full preseason. He didn't play any snaps in preseason, and he'll just turn things around. But, I'm not as convinced that they're just going to run through the NFC North as most everybody else is. So, last night didn't shock me too much that game was pretty competitive with the undermanned Rams team. So, long story short, I still think the Vikings offer some value. I think their schedule at the end of the day is probably going to prohibit them from winning, but it wouldn't surprise me if they pull off some upsets here.
Definitely would not surprise me as well. And we saw really just hopefully a great glimpse of what to expect from them moving forward. But last question for you before we head into the week 2 odds segment, TA. Rookie of the year, offensive rookie of the year. Talk to me. What did you see that obviously, again, can't be making decisions off of 1 week of sample sizes, etc. But Caleb Williams still the heavy favorite. Jaden Daniels number 2. Marv now 3. Talk to me, TA. What are you thinking about the rookie of the year odds?
Yeah, so I liked Harrison coming into the year. Obviously, he dropped 2 easy balls and actually was wide open on that last drive. I wouldn't put too much stock there. Buffalo was supposedly playing. They were clouding him on purpose, and that's why we saw a lot of underneath from Kyler Murray. They were kind of giving the Cardinals those underneath routes, and they were taking them. So I don't know. 1 week, I'm not going to be too concerned. He dropped an easy pass. That was clearly some nerves there. That's why I wish he would have played some preseason to at least get some snaps under his belt, but. He'll be fine, and he's going up against an undermanned Rams defense and secondary this week. So I'll be curious to see if he has a big game. But this could be a nice buy low spot on him. At odds that were better than what we saw going into the season. I never liked Caleb Williams coming in. You'll never convince me that anyone's worth almost even money to win an award like this when we've never even seen you play. So I would never touch Caleb Williams at any of those numbers. Jaden Daniels. Was great with his legs, but I'm the idiot who took the Commanders yesterday, and I just forgot who his OC was. It's a complete Mickey Mouse offense they run. Everything is sideways. There's nothing vertical at all. I should have known better, and that's going to prohibit him from putting up the numbers I think he'll need. And just Dan Quinn and that team. Sorry, Eric, but that team just continues to be mismanaged, and
of course,
I just don't think he'll be in the environment. I agree with Judah. He stole mine. I would have said Brian Thomas. I was leaning that way, actually going into the season. Just the more I saw them in preseason, they're clearly going to take more vertical shots with Trevor Lawrence, and they did that a lot in the first half. I wish it would have continued in the second half, but for whatever reason, they decided to stick to the run way too much. But I think he's going to continue to see a lot of those targets down the field, and that's going to produce some big plays and some bigger numbers. So I think at the current number, Thomas is the best price. But like I said, I still wouldn't count out Harrison to be up there when it's all said and done. So those are 2 guys I think that deserve some love. I know Jalen McMillan had a big game, but he's still the number 3 receiver there, and that was the worst secondary in the NFL he's going up against. So I wouldn't see those numbers continuing. But I think to me, it's Harrison and Thomas.
Gotcha. Jason, can you bring up those odds for one quick second? Because I actually want to reference one thing, because this is something that Suma mentioned earlier. We're seeing Adonai Mitchell at 100-1. Suma mentioned that he was overthrown twice, and he realistically could have had an absolutely outstanding game. Suma, any love for that potential? Because, again, if he would have connected on one of those 2 passes, we would be seeing a much different market this morning.
My issue is that he might not see the volume overall, because Colts might have more game scripts throughout the season where they are run heavy, because Steichen really likes to lean into a strength once he figured it out. So if they have a matchup where they can run the ball well, they will likely lean more into it. And I mean, yesterday, despite being behind almost all game, 19 throws, 9 completions. Yes, AD Mitchell might get the occasional big play, but it's really, really banking on like low variance. I'm just not sure that once Josh Down is back, he's likely going to be the wide receiver 3. And 100 to 1 looks solid, but not for my taste.
Yeah, understood. Just wanted to get your thoughts, because could have had a very different stat line. That market could have been different, maybe bringing value on more value on like a Brian Mitchell, etc. if he did connect there. But enough of that. Let's talk week 2 odds before we talk Monday Night Football. So, of course, these openers are coming out early. They get bent into shape by sharp bettors. We're going to see a lot of two-way action. We know how it is when it comes to NFL game lines. Suma, let's start with you, though. What games are you interested in week 2 at open, or just surprised about the lines? Maybe nothing you have, you're running to run to the counter to bet immediately. What are some lines at open that are, piquing your interest a little bit?
So what I find interesting is the market for the Browns Jaguars. And I mean, yes, Deshaun Watson looked like he should not get another start in this league. However, I mean, that number at initial seems like a little overreaction, because the Browns are still so incredibly talented. And the Jags, yes, they could have won that game at Miami, but I think that pre-week 1, what would the line have been in this game? That would not have been 3.5, 4. So interested to hear TA's thoughts on this. But I think that the 4 right now looks really, really, really rich.
We can go right to TA for that. TA, any thoughts on the Browns Jaguars line?
Yeah, I think the one thing we need to be careful of is overreacting. I dropped in our Slack earlier that probably my best week every single year is week 2 because of these overreactions. We see it every year, especially with teams that are, have legitimate talent and just underperformed in week 1, or teams that overperformed expectations. I mean, this isn't the Panthers might be a different story, right? Like those are really, really dregs of the NFL are going to be bad. But, teams like the Browns who have tons of talent going up, it was a terrible matchup. I was actually on the under, which unfortunately that last drive with about 30 seconds left crushed that. And I think it was the right call because, the Browns had a left tackle problem. They didn't have a left tackle. Both Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin were out. I expect at least one or both to be playing this week. I'd be surprised if we don't see that. That's going to help out a ton. Obviously, you have Micah Parsons, who is a game wrecker. Just it doesn't even matter who's over there, especially when it's a third stringer. He's going to wreck the game, and they did. And obviously, Watson looked bad for the most part. And I know the second half was against more of a prevent defense, but he did he made a couple of really good throws. And I was shocked to see, and maybe Judah could talk about this, the PFF grade on him was actually much higher than I would have imagined. Maybe time of game matters there, but he had a beautiful throw to Amari Cooper deep down the sideline at the end, where he got drilled, and it was a perfect throw, and Cooper just dropped it. It would have been an easy touchdown. So he did have a couple of moments, and that's what you try to hang on to. And without preseason coming back from the shoulder, and with that left tackle situation, I think it was just a recipe for disaster. I thought the defense played fine. They were put in a lot of bad spots, not like Dak lit the world on fire there. So I don't think it was as bad as many people are talking about. And, I don't think the Jags secondary is very good. I saw Tyson Campbell was hurt yesterday. He's their only corner, really. So I don't know his status, but that's going to be a huge deal. So I think getting over a field goal is actually a really nice number for the Browns. And I would be looking that way as well.
Very nice little early look from TA based on the back of Suma's thoughts on the Browns and Jaguars. I think you made a great point there, TA, mentioning how this is not the time to overreact to certain things. There's so much going on. Teams have obviously had ample times to prepare for this one opponent heading into the summer, and it's a long grind, variance, etc. Not the time to be overreacting. But Judah, talk to me. What games are standing out to you at Open?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a balance between not overreacting on results, but actually properly reacting and adjusting to some process. And I think the Saints are a great example of that. The common narrative right now, and at least I think this is also being bet into markets because this line hasn't moved much, is like, oh, we just learned the Panthers are really, really bad, as opposed to like some possibility of like actually the Saints might be a little bit better than we anticipated. And I bring up points on process because this was an offense that did not run any motion last year. They did not run much play action. And in week one, they were top 5 in both of those fronts. They're obviously got Clint Kubiak, who is in the San Francisco mold of offensive coordinator. Now, I'm not saying he's the next Kyle Shanahan or the next Mike McDaniel, but there's a possibility that he's a really, really good offensive coordinator, and I don't think we should discount that. And I think there is some kind of process points that would at least lead to a possibility of like, oh, the Saints offense is better than we anticipated. And I think just like tying it back to like the full picture of like, this was a Saints offensive line that projected as one of the worst units in the NFL. They actually graded out as PFF's top pass blocking unit yesterday. Now, much of that has to do with a weak Carolina pass rush, but there's also a chance that this offensive coordinator and the scheme is going to be able to kind of make things easy for Carr and the quarterbacks, and they have weapons to get open, especially when looking at kind of a tail spot here. There's a non-zero chance the Saints have a very, very good offense, and I don't think the market's properly reacting to that, kind of just assuming like, oh, Carolina's really, really bad, and there's some confirmation bias just going on there.
You know what? Well, not to interrupt, but clearly Judah, he still loves Rashid Shaheed. That he's clearly blinded by that. No, I'm just kidding. I actually agree. I didn't watch the game, but I did see that they lead the NFL in pre-snap motion after coming in dead last year. I mean, exactly. You gotta love that, right? Because the new Kubiak offense. Yeah, I mean they've got weapons. It's clear. I'd like to see. I think Carr was only pressured 3 times, so I'd like to see against a real pass rush, but if they can at least give them moderate protection, I totally agree. I think they have potential for upside here that the market isn't pricing in. I'm very curious to see how they handle Micah Parsons and Lawrence this week.
A little bit of a different beast than the Carolina pass rush, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that is also just a very good point overall, because obviously everything is opponent based at this point, and everyone, the perception of the Saints, a lot of people's were just, oh, the offensive line is bad, the Saints offense will be bad. But when you do have a coordinator like Clint Kubiak, who's now incorporating these other elements to try to make his bad offensive line not look as bad as a la Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, etc., you could see some good results. But those are 3 games we went through right there quickly. There's a couple of other big matchups we'll talk about really quickly. Chiefs-Bengals. Obviously, the Chiefs are coming off, extra rest from that opener on Thursday night. The Bengals getting upset against the Patriots. Spread setting 6. Obviously, all the, talk about how Joe Burrow is the Patrick Mahomes slayer, etc. Obviously, we're not going to buy into any of those kinds of things. We're talking about this one particular matchup. But I'll go back to you, Judah. Chiefs-Bengals laying 6 at open. Do you see the spread, widening up, or obviously the Bengals know how big of a game this is? Do you see them tightening up for this notorious slow starting team?
Yeah, I think the spread's kind of right now. I think maybe we'll see a little bit more Chiefs action, but to your point, I think we've seen this show before. I think T. Higgins' health matters a lot here. What's more intriguing to me is the total, I think, which is like, if this Bengals offense is particularly bad, I think this total is a little bit too high and might drift towards the under here. But like, these are 2 of the most known teams in the NFL. I think we've got like a pretty good idea of the Bengals are going to be a good offense. I think there's like varying degrees of the Chiefs offensive success. Like, are they like a top 10 unit? Or are they like back to clear number 1 as this kind of more vertical and explosive passing attack? But I see this total as a little bit too high right now, if anything.
Looks like the total is up there, so definitely around some key numbers as well. So make sure you're shopping around and making sure you get the best of what you can. Ti, any totals that are looking appealing to you at open? Not necessarily spreads. Any totals? Muted, Ti.
Nothing has. Actually, the one that did jump out, it's already moved, was the Giants-Washington total. I think it's up 1.5, 2 points. Someone already released it, unfortunately. but that was one I was looking at. I do think both defenses are terrible. I thought that the Giants, I watched in every play because I was heavy. I'm heavy on the Vikings, obviously, in many retrospects. So the Giants could have, they could have moved the ball a lot better. I mean, Daniel Jones just missed guys. I think he saw all the Flores kind of pre-snap stuff really spooked him. I think when he gets a basic defense like Washington, who has no pass rush and no secondary, I think he'll be able to move the ball, and I think vice versa against the Giants' non-existent secondary. I think that even when they go sideways, I think they'll be able to move it a little bit. Jaden Daniels just makes too many plays with his legs to take unders here with Washington. I think they're going to be an over team for a while. So, that was one that I was keeping an eye on. I think hopefully the number comes back after that release. Usually we see some buyback at some point. I think 43 and under makes some sense. So that was the one. The other one with the Rams Cardinals, just I think both teams have issues in the secondary. I mean, the Cardinals defense is with who we all thought they were. Just no talent. It doesn't matter how much scheming and coaching you get. They just can't. They're not going to be able to put any pressure on Stafford and company. Even with I think Steve Avila got hurt, but and then vice versa. I think the Cardinals are going to be able to move it on a lot of teams. I know that was going into the year they're sneaky top 5, top 10 offense. So that one is interesting. It's obviously pretty high. So that one you're going to need some help in. But those are the two that stuck out to me initially.
Very nice. Washington Giants could be a matchup of two of the worst secondaries in football, if not the two worst secondaries in football. So, like you said, no pressure on Daniel Jones. Jane Daniels with pressure, but seems that he can escape the pocket like he did in week 1. So we shall see. Suma, before Monday Night Football, any last thoughts? Maybe Indianapolis, Green Bay. Of course, the Colts now favorited on the road with the Jordan Love news and obviously playing a good game against Houston and in general being a solid team. But what are your thoughts on the Colts Packers?
Yeah, Fanduel just moved to a flat 3.5 once we were talking 30 minutes ago. I think it will be very interesting to see how the market plays the 3 shaded towards the Colts here all week long. So whether we are going to go back towards a flat 3 or whether the market decides that Colts might be the correct side here and pushes it out further to -4. It will be very interesting to see if it's really Colts against a not so good backup quarterback. I mean, tough to see the market having much confidence in the Packers here, but we will wait and see.
Wait and see for the Green Bay Packers and Jordan Love and the Malik Willis experiment. But guys, let's move on to Monday Night Football. Jets 49ers. So we do have an SGP of the week that we're going to get into in a couple of minutes, but let's just talk holistically about this football game. We'll start with you, TA. Jets 49ers. Any thoughts, comments, concerns on this Monday night matchup?
Yeah, I'm on the Niners, but I got it at 3.5. I still think 4 is fine. I wouldn't mind if you missed the number getting, maybe looking at the Niners first half. I'm actually high on the Jets for the year, for the season, but I think this is just a horrible spot, timing, all those sorts of things. I mean, historically, again, small samples, but Aaron Rodgers has been really bad in most week 1s, especially as he's gotten older and he's played no preseason. So there's just been a lot of rust from him. We've seen some of the worst performances from an EPA perspective. If you look at his entire game log for the last 5+ years, it's almost always week 1. That's his worst week. I'd actually look at some interception numbers here from a prop perspective. But I just think if that alone, is one thing. But when you also add the fact that he's 40 years old, coming off the Achilles, we saw what Kirk Cousins did yesterday. Like the guy couldn't move the ball, couldn't move out of the tackle box, and he couldn't push on his throws. And I see no reason why Aaron Rodgers could be that much different at his age. And then you add in the fact that there's a brand new cast that surroundings. I just think this is a horrible spot against a very aggressive
San Francisco pass rush of all the teams. This is not the team I want to be facing week one. Mike Williams is going to be on a pitch count. Like all these things going against this Jets offense, I could only look to the Niners, either first half or full game. I'm very surprised that everyone feels like everyone is backing the Jets that I've seen, anecdotally. And I just don't see it. I like I said, I can like them for the year, but just not think that this is the right spot for them. Yeah, their defense should be fine against Brandon Ayuk on a pitch count, and Trent Williams just coming in. But I still think without Hassan Reddick, that's going to hurt their pass rush. And I think that I trust Kyle Shanahan with a full off season. He knows Robert Saleh's defense very well. I think he's going to have some things for him. He's going to have a good game plan. And they should be able to do just enough to win and cover this game. So I'm a Niners backer today.
Leave TA on the 49ers. Let's go to the Jets fan, Suma. Do you agree with TA's handicap, though obviously you prefer a Jets win in this one, or are you viewing the game differently entirely?
I have no stake in the game. We'll watch it in the morning during my morning coffee. Right now at 4.5, tiny lean towards the Jets, but overall not a strong opinion. I think what's fascinating about this game is that we don't really know anything about the Jets offense. They could come out and be really good, or they could come out and be really bad. So there are some interesting hidden variants, and I think that the Niners defense was sneakily very bad at stopping the run last year. They are still thin along their defensive line going into week one. And I think there are scenarios in which the Jets can run the ball well, that Breece Hall could actually have a very good, decent game. And that might be a way for the Jets to consistently move the ball here. Getting Breece Hall going, also involving him in the passing game. And if you told me that Breece Hall is going to have a 110 plus yard game with 1 or 2 touchdowns, I would not be surprised at all against that Niners defense. And that might be the key for the Jets offense to make things interesting on the road. But if you get like a very rusty Aaron Rodgers, I will say that his injury is different to Kirk Cousins because it's the opposite leg, so he might have no issues really pushing forward while throwing the ball. Also a different timeline than Kirk Cousins, but there might still be some rust. The guy has not played a more than 1 or more than 2 passing downs for 2 years now. Offensive line might need some time. Mike Williams, like TA said, will be on a pitch count. So there are different paths that this game could take. For me, to back the 49ers, there's too much hidden variance involved with the New York Jets. So in the end, I will gladly stay away. My number on the game is roughly 4, so no edge there.
No edge there. Just rooting as a fan. You got TA, though, on the 49ers. But Judah, let's talk a same-game parlay. Of course, for Monday Night Football, FanDuel Sportsbook has a no-sweat same-game parlay and also a 50% boost on live bets. So we could discuss maybe if one of these parlay legs starts slow, where to get in live, etc. Let's talk about your Monday Night Football same-game parlay and your holistic view of this one, Judah.
Yeah, I think I kind of share the same sentiment of if we're projecting the medians or the things that we think are kind of most likely to happen, betting in the minus 110s of the world, this is a spot where I kind of want to wait and see. But if we're going to try and pick off a spot kind of wider on the distribution and build a same game parlay, I think to Suma's point, we don't really know how good the Jets offense is. And there's certainly still some ceiling there. It would not be entirely crazy for Aaron Rodgers to, with a pretty good offensive line, with some decent weapons, put together a pretty big performance. This isn't to say it is likely to happen, but at least more likely than I think the market is giving credit for. And I think that if Aaron Rodgers is having a good passing game, I think that is likely a function of the Jets winning. And I think the markets are pricing that in the opposite direction. So what I'm looking at here as a good basis, just Aaron Rodgers, 300 yards, We're going to take the Jets at 5.5. I would also just add, I think this is actually a pretty vulnerable 49ers defense. I think they're kind of coasting a little bit on the reputation that they've built over the past bunch of years when their defensive coordinators were different, going from Robert Saleh to D'Amico Ryans. It's Steve Wilkes right now. It's a different story. They've kind of atrophied a little bit on the defensive side. By most of my numbers, the second half of last season, they were actually a bottom 10 defense. Nick Bosa is really terrific on the line, and Hargrave's pretty solid too. The rest is kind of weak, and this is actually a pretty solid, at least on paper, Jets offensive line. I expect them to be doubling Bosa, and I don't think that the Niners have particularly great one-on-one matchups elsewhere. So all of that is to say, we don't really know what the Jets offense is capable of doing, but still Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson is still a terrific receiver. Mike Williams is going to be seeing snaps. We're going to go Jets minus 5.5 here, not Jets plus 4.5.
Bad season.
Wait, but what is Aaron? This is still Aaron Rodgers. Who's Aaron? What was Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago?
Aaron Rodgers 2 years ago was fine. Aaron Rodgers was not.
Yeah, he's just average. Yeah, I mean, he was just average. So I feel like we're thinking of Aaron Rodgers as MVP Aaron Rodgers, and it's
no, but the truth can lie somewhere in between there. This isn't to say the Aaron Rodgers of 2 years ago is who he is now. It's probably not. There's also a chance that he's a little better than he was before in this situation. We don't know. Or even still,
Judah's the king of this. I was just trying to
even if he's not that good, that doesn't necessarily mean that in one particular game he can't put together 300 yards, right?
I agree.
We're not betting on his production. I would love if we had some alts on Allen Lazard, but I think he is probably the most mispriced prop here. So I'm going to add that as the last leg, just his regular over. I would love to be taking his alts. I think he's going to be seeing a ton of the field in the slot. I anticipate Mike Williams being on a little bit of a snap count. And if Aaron Rodgers is throwing for 300 yards, Allen Lazard is almost definitely going to go over his prop. And the correlation there is not being appropriately priced. So just to recap here, we've got, I think, a pretty overrated 49ers defense going against a quarterback that, and in an offense that I think does have some ceiling. We're getting some pretty juicy odds here. Not that much needs to go right for Rodgers to throw for 300 yards and the Jets defense to slow down a Niners team that's been without their left tackle. Brandon Ayuk's going to be limited. There could be plenty of play volume here to work with if this Jets defense is as good as anticipated. Not that much needs to go right here, and we're getting almost 32-1.
Absolutely love it, Judah. And again, you can use some of the offers that FanDuel has for Monday Night Football, including no sweat same game parlay, and also a 50% profit boost on any live bet. But Judah, that looks like an absolute banger, and we have TA and Judah going head to head on here. I'm sure you'll. This time on Monday, we'll talk about, of course, the results of this Jets-Niner game. If Judah was great to anticipate this, I guess, Rodgers resurgence, or if TA was correct by evaluating some of these recent week one performances, rust factors, etc. But that is going to do it for Forward Progress this week. We really appreciate everybody joining and sticking in the chat. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share the content. It's the best way to help us grow. And we'll be back here same time and same place. On behalf of myself, Judah, TA, and Suma, thank you. We'll see you guys next week. Best of luck with your bets tonight.